The first time I saw her eyes filled with quiet tears, I knew there was a story behind them. The kind of story people carry in silence because no one has ever asked them how they're really doing. It wasn't supposed to be anything more than a quick visit that afternoon. But life has a strange way of turning ordinary moments into the ones that stay with you forever. If you believe in kindness, compassion, and second chances, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Journal, because stories like this one remind us that sometimes the smallest gestures can change someone's world. It was a bright Saturday, the kind of day when sunlight falls like soft gold through half-open curtains. I had stopped by to return a borrowed tool to my old friend, Marcus. We hadn't spoken much since high school. Life had pulled us in different directions. He was busy working at a local car dealership, and I had been freelancing as a photographer, chasing sunsets and stories for magazines. When I parked outside their suburban house, I noticed how still everything seemed. The roses in the front garden had wilted slightly, the paint on the mailbox was chipped, and the house carried that quiet, heavy air of a place where laughter used to live. Marcus wasn't home. His mom, Mrs. Alden, opened the door instead. I hadn't seen her in years. She was wearing a pale cream sweater and jeans, her silver-streaked hair tied up neatly. There was something about her smile that day, gentle but tired, like someone holding herself together through invisible cracks. "Oh, Ethan," she said softly. "It's been years." I smiled back, trying not to notice the slight tremble in her voice. "Yeah, I just came to drop off the wrench Marcus lent me last week." Her eyes softened. "He's at work today, but you can leave it inside." I stepped into the house, and a wave of nostalgia hit me. The smell of cinnamon from her old kitchen, the creak of the wooden floor, the photos on the wall showing younger, happier days. One of them caught my attention. Marcus's dad, smiling proudly beside his son at a baseball game. I remembered that Manuel, Mr. Alden, had been the heart of that home. He passed away 2 years ago, and it showed in every corner of that house. As Mrs. Alden led me to the kitchen, I noticed how spotless everything was, too spotless as if cleanliness had become her way of keeping control in a life that had slipped out of it. "Would you like some tea?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sure," I said, not wanting to be rude. She poured it carefully, her hands steady but slow, and we sat at the table across from each other. Sunlight filtered through the lace curtains, touching her face just enough to reveal the faint lines of grief. For a while, we just sat there in silence, sipping tea, the ticking of the wall clock the only sound between us. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke quietly. "It's strange, isn't it? How time keeps moving even when you don't want it to." I looked at her, unsure what to say. Her eyes glistened, and she gave a small, sad smile. "Since Harold passed, this house, it's so quiet. Marcus barely talks to me anymore. He thinks I should move on, but he doesn't understand how much of me was buried with his father." There was a lump in my throat. I wanted to say something comforting, but the truth is, nothing ever really fills that kind of emptiness. She stood up to refill her cup, her hand brushing against the counter for support. That's when she said it. Not with any flirtation, not with hidden meaning, but with a trembling loneliness that cracked the air between us. "We're alone," she whispered, her back still turned. "Just you and me in this big, empty house." I felt something tighten in my chest. Not discomfort, not temptation, but empathy. A quiet ache for a woman who had given her life to love, only to be left behind by time. I rose slowly from my chair, took a deep breath, and said softly, "Just for a little while, if that's okay." She turned then, her eyes searching mine, and I saw what she really wanted. Not company, not affection, just someone who saw her. Someone who didn't treat her like a ghost in her own home. We sat down again. This time she spoke more freely. She told me about the nights she still cooked 2 plates of dinner by habit, about how she sometimes left the TV on just to feel like someone else was there. She said she missed laughter most of all, not just her husband's, but her son's. "Marcus doesn't talk to me much these days," she said, staring into her tea. "He thinks grief is weakness. But it's not, is it?" I shook my head. "No. It's love that hasn't found a place to go." Her eyes met mine, and a tear finally escaped down her cheek. I didn't try to stop her. Sometimes people just need permission to feel. I listened as she spoke for nearly an hour about her marriage, her fears, her loneliness. She laughed softly when I reminded her how she used to chase Marcus and me out of the kitchen for for stealing cookies. For the first time that day, I saw her smile reach her eyes. Then the sound of a car pulling up broke the stillness. Marcus was home. She wiped her tears quickly, standing up as if caught doing something she shouldn't. When Marcus walked in, he seemed surprised to see me. "Ethan. Man, what brings you here?" "Just returning your wrench," I said lightly. "Your mom made tea." He gave a half smile, then looked at her, really looked, and something in his expression softened. Maybe he noticed the faint redness around her eyes, or maybe he simply realized he hadn't asked how she was in too long. I excused myself shortly after, but before leaving, Mrs. Alden followed me to the door. Her voice was low, trembling. "Thank you for staying," she said. "You have no idea how much that meant." I smiled. "Anytime." Days passed, then weeks. I didn't think much about that afternoon until one evening I got a text from Marcus. "Hey, man, thanks for visiting that day. Mom hasn't stopped talking about you. Said you reminded her that kindness still exists." Something about that message stayed with me. I started visiting more often, not for long, just enough to bring a little life back into the house. Sometimes I'd help with groceries, sometimes we'd just sit in the backyard talking about her garden. Slowly, the place started to change. Flowers bloomed again, curtains stayed open longer, and laughter began to find its way back through the walls. One afternoon, Marcus joined us on the porch. The three of us watched the neighborhood kids play catch on the street, and for the first time, I saw Mrs. Alden lean her head back, close her eyes, and let out a laugh so free it felt like spring after a long winter. That's when I realized something profound. Kindness doesn't always have to be grand or romantic. Sometimes it's just showing up for someone who's been forgotten by the noise of the world. Weeks later, when I stopped by again, Mrs. Alden handed me a small framed photo. It was of her, her late husband, and a much younger Marcus at the park. "For reminding me what hope feels like," she said. "You gave me that back." I didn't know how to respond. I just smiled, thanked her, and promised to visit again soon. As I drove away that day, sunlight poured across the road ahead of me, golden and alive. For the first time in a long time, I felt something deeper than peace. I felt purpose. Life isn't about fixing people or rescuing them. It's about noticing when someone needs to be seen. Because sometimes being there just for a little while can be exactly what someone needs to start living again. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Journal, where real stories remind us that compassion can heal even the quietest corners of life. Before you scroll, comment "Kindness lives here" if you believe a single act of care can bring someone back from their loneliness. Moral: sometimes all it takes to change a life is showing up. Not to fix, not to save, but simply to be